Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've come close to death? That near miss on the motorway, that chunk of steak that nearly got lodged in your throat, or that sketchy DIY job that you probably shouldn't have attempted. Any one of them could have been the end of you. If you've watched any of my videos, you'll know that in life, all it takes is one single mistake. Find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, and suddenly, it's all over. If by chance that there's a camera recording, your final moments may just end up frozen in time, you might find yourself in a clip captured right before horror. But hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Ryan from Tragedy Tales, and over here we cover all things tragic. In this week's video, we're going to break down 5 more seemingly normal clips that turned into a nightmare within seconds. From a terrifying elevator mishap in Indonesia to a terribly tragic fire in Turkey. This week, as you guys are all accustomed to, we've got clips from all across the world, reminding you that every day could very well be your last. So strap in and draw the curtains, and let's get right into it. First up is a case that I'm sure many of us have had nightmares about, the kind that you wake up in a cold sweat, relieved that it isn't real. But in this case, it was very real and very, very horrifying. This haunting entry begins on the 27th of April 2023 at the Kuala Namu International Airport in Indonesia. Thousands funneled into the entrance for what was supposed to be a normal flight to wherever they were going. Workers arrived for their shifts, and the day began just like any other. As usual in these kind of stories, nothing was out of the ordinary until 2 workers noticed a strange but foul smell coming from inside one of the elevators. Upon inspection, it was clear that the smell was coming from beneath the elevator. As they got closer to the smell, it became truly unbearable. Workers opened one of the elevator doors, and when their eyes focused, they finally saw a crumpled up body lying beneath them. They realized that what they were smelling was a decomposing body. They were smelling the unmistakable smell of death. After realizing what they had discovered, workers backed off and called the police and ambulances to the scene. Police officers and ambulance crews filled the section of the airport, all looking like they were in a panic. They too were shocked at what they had discovered. Inside lay the decomposing body of a woman who died days ago, identified as 38-year-old Asaya Sintadui. The very first thing officials did was check the CCTV footage from within the lift over the last few days, and eventually they realised what had happened. Upon checking the CCTV, they spotted Asaya calmly entering the lift 3 days previously. The CCTV shows her entering and taking the lift to the 2nd floor. She was on her way up to meet her niece at the check-in area of the airport. As the lift reached her destination, she then appeared to be confused. The lift had stopped at what she thought was her floor, but the doors had not opened. Unaware that they were already open, Asaya began frantically pressing buttons, believing that she was stuck in the lift. The lift doors continuously opened and closed behind her, but somehow she just didn't notice. Instead, she spiraled into a complete panic. She called her niece, who was waiting at the airport, to tell her that she was stuck in the lift. Thinking that the doors had simply jammed, all while on the phone to her niece, she begins to pry the doors open. All on CCTV, as she pried her fingers between the metal doors, they gave little resistance and quickly swung open. However, there was no floor behind, no freedom. Instead, beyond the doors was an exposed, open space that was used for maintenance workers. As the doors swung open, Asaya tumbled forward straight into the void and fell 3 stories to a recess space below the elevator. This space allowed her to fall inside and allowed the lift to continue to function without crushing her. Her cause of death could not be determined, meaning there's a chance that she didn't die from the fall. It's quite possible that she was trapped down there for hours, unable to shout for help until she succumbed to her injuries. Absolutely horrifying. When Asaya failed to show up, her family contacted airport staff and told them that she had fallen down the elevator shaft because she said that she was trapped on the phone. Airport officials replied to them and said that no one was actively monitoring the CCTV camera from within the elevator and that the family would not be allowed to check any of the footage for procedural reasons. When they asked to check the elevator shaft instead, the airport again refused. Ridiculous. It's totally possible that if they checked the shaft when requested, she may well still have been alive and been able to be rescued. A 3-story fall is no joke, but it's survivable. Instead, the airport refused and left her to rot in there for 3 days. Nobody could believe that such a large airport could have safety issues like this. Why was there such a big gap behind the doors? I don't know if that's standard, but it seems a bit crazy that you can just pry open the doors with little effort and fall 3 stories. Shortly after the gruesome discovery was made, Asaya's husband, Ahmed, raised 6 reports against 6 companies, accusing negligence causing death. He filed a police report against 2 Indonesian-owned companies which helped manage the airport, as well as GMR Airports Consortium, in the hopes that his beloved wife's death was not in vain, and it does not repeat itself again. Now, this is just one of those cases that you have to look at twice, because it's just so crazy from all angles. The CCTV footage showing the doors opening behind her back is shocking. If she'd just turned around instead of attempting to pry the doors open, she would most likely still be with us today. Your wedding anniversary is supposed to be a joyous event, celebrating the partnership of 2 people, the years that they weathered together, and the love that's still standing. But for some people, that date brings something else entirely: grief, betrayal, and in this case, a shocking, unpredictable tragedy. With that in mind, this case unfolds in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, in the Bareilly district, on the 2nd of April 2025. That day, it was a very special day. It was the 25th wedding anniversary for 50-year-old Wasim Sarwat and his wife, Farah. The pair wanted to make their silver jubilee as grand as it possibly could be, so they invited each and every member of their family to the Farham Lawns, a luxury hotel in the city situated along the Pilbit Bypass Road. The evening was meant to be unforgettable: dancing, a vow renewal, the ceremonial cake cutting, and a night of partying to follow. Sadly, that night would prove to be unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. As the party was in full swing, everything was great. Drinks were flowing, music was blasting, and everyone was having the time of their lives. All captured on video. 50-year-old Wasim, who worked as a shoe merchant, can be seen dancing on stage with his wife. He's smiling, so is she. They're just dancing their heart out as the entire family watched. The clip goes on, and you can see the couple having a blast, having the time of their lives, enjoying their silver jubilee. They're having fun until all of a sudden, Wasim collapsed on stage. Countless members of the family rushed to his aid to discover him unconscious. Upon check-in, his heart had stopped beating. He'd gone into cardiac arrest. They immediately started CPR while paramedics were called, but it just wasn't looking good. First responders rushed him to a private hospital nearby, where they tried their very best to restart his heart, but unfortunately they were unsuccessful and he was pronounced dead at the hospital. A senior heart doctor reviewed his case and said that Wasim died from a heart attack, most likely caused by an undiagnosed heart condition. A day that was supposed to be full of joy had turned into one of tragedy. The couple had planned to cut the cake together after the dance, but sadly, they never got the chance to. The video of the pair dancing was shared widely on social media. One user commented that it was very sad that it occurred, but noted that very, very few people get to go out this way. Happy, smiling, doing what you love with the person that you love, surrounded by your family. And that's very true. His family later laid him to rest near to where he was born. He's survived by his beloved wife Farah, as well as their 2 sons. This one is just one of those cases where, if you actually think about the odds of this happening, It's truly crazy. Sometimes I think destiny and fate are real because seriously, what are the chances? Of all days, to have a heart attack in that exact moment, it does make you think. Our next haunting clip was recorded in Novi Sad, a city located in northern Serbia. Renowned for its vibrant art scene, its educational institutions, and events like the Exit Music Festival, Novi Sad was also home to a unique but odd building, the Novi Sad railway station. Located in the western part of the city, not far from the city centre, the Novi Sad railway station stood as a hub for travel for the local area. Averaging more than 9,300 passengers daily, it connected local and international routes, including the Budapest-Belgrade corridor. First constructed in 1964, the railway station was structurally advanced for its period. Its design was bold and unusual, and amongst other unique features, its main drawing point was the eye-catching roof that extended to a canopy over the main entrance. This canopy measured 157 feet long, or around 48 meters, and was built entirely out of concrete slabs laid on top of each other. Due to its intrinsic design, with the canopy suspended over the building's entrance, this structure was prone to concrete degradation as well as overall fatigue. Multiple experts suggested a service life of just 50 years for either the canopy or the materials that were used building it. Despite these worries, the station held strong for 57 years, well past its suggested lifespan. While it was still standing, it had been truly neglected over the years and had no proper maintenance conducted while it was in use. By the early 2000s, it had fallen into disrepair, yet it stood firm, continuing to serve the city. In 2021, its first major renovation project began. This renovation project completely rebuilt the railway platforms, including the platform's underpass and apparently the canopy. Fast forward to November 1st, 2024, the newly renovated train station was now in full use. Trains were on schedule, and hundreds of people flooded in and out of the station. It was just another day in Novi Sad. Then, at exactly 11:52 AM, tragedy struck with brutal force. As people were coming and going inside the train station, all of a sudden, the then 60-year-old concrete canopy collapsed without warning. Eyewitnesses described a thunderous crack, then a low, crushing roar as the 148 feet slab pancaked onto the plaza below. Dust and crushed cement clouded the air, choking out visibility. When the dust settled, the scale of the devastation truly became clear. The thick concrete canopy fell with such force that no one underneath it had any chance to escape. Just moments earlier, people had been walking through the entrance. Now the entire area was buried beneath thousands of kilograms of shattered debris and twisted steel rebar. A total, full-scale horror unfolded as everyone realised that this was seriously bad. Those nearby attempted to grab and pull at the concrete, but it was no use. The concrete was so heavy, they could do basically nothing. About 80 rescuers from multiple cities across Serbia rushed to the scene and cordoned off the platform. Firefighters, medics, and police officers scrambled over the rubble, desperately searching for signs of life. While some had been instantly killed in the collapse, screams could be heard coming from deep inside. Dogs were brought in, cranes and excavators followed, slowly peeling away layers of the fallen structure. Two women, trapped beneath the weight of the concrete, could not be pulled out for hours. When they finally were retrieved, they were both barely alive. By the end of the day, 14 people were dead and 3 others were injured. All 3 of the injured were forced to undergo amputations to save their lives and were in serious, critical condition. One of the women who survived being trapped under the rubble sadly succumbed to her injuries 16 days later, and months later, on March the 21st, 2025, another of the 3 died, a 19-year-old man, bringing the death toll to 16. Of course, all public rail traffic for Novi Sad was moved to alternate stations, and the building was closed for the foreseeable future. Citizens lit candles and laid flowers at Freedom Square and in front of the railway station. They just couldn't believe that a newly renovated building could collapse so suddenly, so shortly after completion. Well, they were right to not believe it, because it turns out, after the renovation was complete, Serbian Railways Infrastructure, the state enterprise which operates the building, stated that the front entrance canopy was not reconstructed during the renovations and that it remained an original part of the structure. They said that the canopy was considered a protected architectural element tied to the building's original 1964 design, restricting what changes could be made to the structure as it was deemed historically or culturally significant. Well, it is now. Instead of structural reinforcement, or maybe a replacement, the canopy received what authorities described as a conservation treatment. All that was basically was an aesthetic cleaning and surface work, but no actual strengthening of the underlying materials. This was absolutely crazy, given that multiple experts only gave it a 50-year lifespan almost 60 years previously, and still, they didn't bother to renovate it at all, leaving it to collapse and take the lives of 16 innocent people. The man that was ultimately responsible for making this decision was Serbian President Milos Vukovic and Construction Minister Goran Vesic. While no reinforcement was done on the canopy, glass was added in the most recent renovation, despite it being far over the maximum weight allowed. Experts said that visual signs of the collapse were clear days before the incident. Upon hearing this news, that this was all totally avoidable, on November the 6th, nationwide mass protests began. Crowds of more than 100,000 in number began gathering in Novi Sad's centre, calling for the arrest of those responsible for the station's failed reconstruction and demanded that the president, as well as the construction minister, resign. At 6 p.m, the huge crowd conducted a minute's silence for those who were lost, before marching towards the city centre hall. Things quickly turned violent, with protesters vandalising buildings with paint, throwing rocks, breaking windows. The entire country demanded accountability. So, shortly after, the Novi Sad Higher Public Prosecutor's Office initiated an investigation into the collapse, and more than 40 people, including Construction Minister Goran Vesic, were subjected to questioning. On the 30th of December 2024, Vesic and 12 others were formally charged over the collapse. These charges encompassed causing general danger and conducting irregular and improper construction works. Due to the immense pressure, President Milos Vukovic resigned on January 28th, as did Construction Minister Goran Vesic. To this very day, citizens continue their fight, rallying for transparency, justice, and accountability for a totally avoidable disaster that claimed the lives of 16 people. This next haunting video was recorded on April the 29th, 2013 in Parwan province, around 47 kilometers north of Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. That day, a cargo Boeing 747 operated by National Airlines had been loaded with 5 armoured military vehicles at a camp called Camp Shurabak. These vehicles totaled 80 tons of weight that were strapped in at the camp before taking off for its destination of Dubai. After leaving Camp Shurabak and flying for an hour and a half, the crew made their first scheduled refueling stop at Bagram Airfield, one of the largest US military bases in Afghanistan. Aboard the Boeing 747 were 7 crew members, experienced professionals who had completed countless flights between Afghanistan and Dubai. The captain, 34-year-old Brad Hazler, had logged over 6,000 flight hours, enough to make him one of the most seasoned pilots in cargo aviation. At approximately 3:30, after refueling at Bagram Airfield, all standard checks had been completed. The flight engineer had inspected the cargo and confirmed that the aircraft was ready, and moments later, the enormous aircraft lumbered down the runway and gained speed. Of course, everything seemed totally normal, until it wasn't. As the aircraft climbed into the air, it quickly reached 1,200 feet in height, when, in a horrifying instant, the plane's nose suddenly pitched up at an extreme angle, far steeper than any controlled ascent. The pilots, startled, had attempted to counter the anomaly, but within seconds, their worst nightmare occurred. The aircraft stalled. The moment this occurred, was captured by dashcam. A ghostly, surreal sight. The dashcam shows the colossal jet, one of the largest in operation, falling from the sky. On the ground, soldiers and airfield personnel watched in total shock. They saw the pilot's desperate attempt to stay airborne, but it was clear that gravity was winning. They could do nothing but watch as the Boeing 747 plunged towards Earth. Then, impact. The explosion was instantaneous. A fiery inferno erupted upon impact, crashing still within the perimeter of Bagram Airfield. A deafening blast shook the ground, scattering debris in all directions. Metal fragments flew through the air like bullets, hitting structures, vehicles, and nearby aircraft. Miraculously, no one on the ground had been hurt. But inside the doomed aircraft, the fate of all 7 souls aboard had been sealed. None survived. The subsequent investigation showed what happened. Analysts combed through the wreckage looking for answers, and they discovered that the cargo, the 5 military vehicles, sadly had been improperly secured. The moment the plane lifted off for the second time, the restraints failed, allowing the massive vehicles to roll backwards with immense force, smashing through the rear pressure bulkhead. The violent shift in weight had rendered the rear flight control systems useless, locking the aircraft in a catastrophic nose-up position. Those in control had no chance whatsoever to recover. Additionally, it was discovered that the aircraft was carrying more weight than it could safely handle, another fatal error. Because of these findings, several lawsuits were opened, one of which concluded years later with the jury awarding almost $115 million to the families of 3 of the deceased men on board. That day, for those who witnessed the disaster firsthand, the image of the mighty aircraft falling from the sky is now forever imprinted in their minds, and now imprinted in yours too. This next entry is a case that occurred pretty recently, but for some reason, I don't know about you guys, but I never saw it in the news, I never saw it posted on any social media. It seems to be swept completely under the rug, and I have no idea why, because it's one of the most tragic and avoidable tragedies in recent history. This entry begins on the cold winter night of January the 21st, 2025, in Kartalkaya, Bolu province, Turkey. As the Turkish winter evening weather swept in, hundreds of guests bunkered down at the Grand Kartal Hotel, a 12-story hotel situated in the remote Kartalkaya ski resort just outside Bolu city. The Grand Kartal Hotel, built in 1998, was positioned in a remote mountainous area, so it makes sense that it was primarily used for skiing tourists. It was one of Turkey's most popular ski resorts, having over 161 rooms and 350 beds. For decades, they catered to domestic and international tourists who came to the location to ski, snowboard, and enjoy winter sports. That fateful night of January the 21st, the hotel was housing 238 guests. As it was the peak of winter and school break, the hotel was around 80 to 90% full. As guests were fast asleep in their beds, something occurred in the 4th floor kitchen that started a small fire. Believing that they had it under control, hotel management did not phone emergency services immediately, and instead ordered staff not to alert guests while they attempted to manage the situation internally. Quickly, they realized that they didn't stand a chance. Due to the wooded cladded exterior of the hotel, the flames quickly spiraled out of control and began spreading up the exterior of the hotel at a terrifying rate. According to survivors, as the fire spread, fire alarms and water sprinklers did not activate. Panicked guests began rushing out of their hotel rooms with their children to find pitch black, smoke-filled corridors. While the building did have 2 emergency exits, there were no functioning emergency exit lights to guide people to safety. The fire was first reported to emergency services at around 3:27 a.m, but according to witnesses, they say that they smelt and saw flames as early as an hour prior. The intensity of the flames prevented onlookers and guests from helping, as they were unable to get back into the building once they'd left. Those on the ground began to dial for emergency services, but as it was the dead of winter, and the fact that the hotel was in a pretty remote mountainous spot, it would be a while before they arrived. A total unimaginable nightmare unfolded as the building continued to burn. Men, women and children desperately screamed out of their windows, begging for someone to save them. But for most, rescue never came in time. Instead of trying their luck running through the corridors or waiting for firefighters to arrive, some guests began tying bedsheets together and lowered them out the windows, which actually worked pretty well. But 3 individuals were in such a panic that they leapt from their windows, only one of whom survived the fall. Several trapped victims inside made desperate pleas for help via social media as the blaze unfolded. One particularly tragic case involved a 25-year-old maid who was trapped on the 12th floor. She called her father seeking advice on what to do, and despite his desperate pleas for her to not jump, ultimately she had no choice and she leapt out of the 12th floor window, and she was one of the victims that later succumbed to her injuries in intensive care. Now apparently, Cartauquaya has no dedicated firefighting service, so approximately 267 emergency personnel, 30 fire engines, and 28 ambulances were deployed to the scene from farther afield. By the time they arrived over an hour later, it was all but too late. The flames had already wrapped themselves around the building, completely engulfing it. Many people were already dead. Fire engines barraged the building with water from all angles and worked to save those trapped and provide aid to those injured. Due to the cliffside position of the hotel, firefighters struggled to reach guests on the other side of the building, further hampering rescue efforts. The fire was finally extinguished 12 hours later, and by then, the losses were staggering. At first, the death toll stood at 10, but shortly after, this was amended to 78 people, injuring 51 others. Most victims died from suffocation, and sadly, at least 36 of the fatalities were children. In some cases, multiple members of the same family died, with one family losing more than 10 members. I just can't even imagine that. Going on holiday with 10 of your other family members and being the only one coming back. As there was no big enough morgue nearby, bodies of the dead were piled haphazardly in the back of a refrigerator truck that was parked outside. The cause of the fire has yet to be proven 100%. However, one newspaper reported that it was due to hot oil catching fire during breakfast preparations, while others reported that the flames spread after the wrong intervention of the kitchen staff by pouring water. Another media outlet suggested that the fire originated from a wiring fault within the grill. But regardless of how it started, it was clear that this building was not fit to house anyone, let alone hundreds of guests. The shameless lack of fire safety exacerbated the scale of the fire and the number of the deaths. Many families of the dead were left wondering how this kind of building can pass safety inspections and remain open in 2025. They turned to officials who just pointed fingers at each other. Basically, long story short, just because of the location of the hotel, nobody really knew who was truly responsible for it until it was far too late. The Ministry of Tourism said that it should be Bolu City who was responsible for it, but they said the hotel was outside the city's limits and said that it was clearly the Ministry of Tourism's responsibility. Officials stated that the hotel had a recent fire certificate, but upon scrutiny, it turns out that this fire certificate was only applied to a small cafe, not the main hotel or its kitchen. So in reality, the building had no valid fire safety certificate for its entire history. The hotel was inspected multiple times while it was open, and these reports highlighted several serious safety concerns. One report from December 2024, just a month before the fire, conducted by Bolu's fire department at the hotel's own request, flagged 7 serious violations: a broken fire alarm system, meaning it was not possible for it to go off, no sprinklers whatsoever, despite being made a legal requirement in all buildings for public use in 2008, unsafe fire doors, missing emergency lights, and even an unapproved, difficult to reach top floor. Despite these findings, nothing was done. No agency stepped in to close it or enforce these safety standards, and soon after applying for their fire safety certificate, the hotel withdrew its application on December 25th, making no fixes whatsoever and remaining open to the public. So because of jurisdictional confusion and regulatory loopholes, it allowed the hotel to stay open and keep operating despite major safety issues, right into the deadliest hotel fire in Turkey's history. So, as it often is with these kind of clips, it turns out that this was a disaster waiting to happen. Multiple red flags had been ignored over the years. It's corruption at its finest. Soon after this, 14 individuals were detained for questioning, including the hotel's owner, the hotel's architect, members of the kitchen staff, deputy mayor of the town, as well as the deputy's fire department's director. This tragedy prompted national mourning and led to intensified scrutiny on fire safety regulations all across Turkey. But, as of writing this, nobody has yet to be held accountable for this truly devastating and avoidable fire. But that is the end of the video. May all those featured rest in peace. You know, I've said this in a few of my videos now, but you'd think by the 20 or something of this series that I'd be running out of clips, that I'd struggle to find tragedies that shock you to your core, but it seems that these clips keep coming, and so this series will continue. First up, we've got the mind-boggling footage of the lady who believed that she was trapped in the elevator. If she'd just turned around, she would have seen that the door was wide open. Instead, she panicked and fell 3 stories to her death. What makes this case worse is that her family knew that she'd fallen down the elevator and asked the airport to look or even check themselves, to which they refused. The fact that she may have survived the fall, I just really hope that she didn't suffer too much. Why did it take 3 days for anyone to check the elevator shaft? There's so many things that just don't make sense in this entry. Then we've got the Serbia train station canopy collapse. Holy moly. The choice not to renovate the canopy was silly and careless. Despite experts stating only a 50-year lifespan, they refused to renovate it during the remodeling due to it being a protected structure. Now this just doesn't make any sense at all. How can you protect something that only has a 50-year lifespan? Because of this oversight in judgment, 16 people who were just going about their day-to-day lost their lives in a second. Of course, we can't forget the horrifying Afghanistan plane clip. I don't think I've ever seen a plane fall like that. Just imagining what was occurring inside is haunting. All because they didn't secure just one of the heavy vehicles they were transporting. Absolutely shocking. Then we had the cardiac arrest in India. I'm always shocked at how quickly a scene can turn from totally joyous to totally tragic. Just what are the chances that his heart stopped beating in that very moment, all on camera, on their wedding anniversary, and right in front of all of their family? It's a brutal reminder that none of us know when our time is up. Then we've got the truly shocking fire in Turkey. This entire case is ridiculous. It was like a symphony of mistakes that combined to make a horrible, horrible avoidable tragedy. Why didn't the hotel install any fire safety mechanisms? Not even sprinklers. They were open in 1999. So that means there's like 26 years of when they had no fire safety whatsoever. This was just a deadly accident waiting to happen. What makes it worse is that officials knew that they had no safety whatsoever and allowed them to stay open without any punishment or anything. It just goes to show that you never truly know that you're safe inside anywhere. It might look all good and posh on the outside, but inside, it's a death trap. How many more buildings like this exist all across the world? How many more tragedies like this need to occur for people to take safety seriously? If this occurred 20 or 30 years ago, maybe I'd be a bit more lenient, but this occurred in 2025, modern day, where everyone's obsessed with safety. It just boggles my mind. And the fact that 78 people lost their lives, with the majority of them being children, is just heartbreaking. But most importantly, what did you guys think of this one? As always, you guys know I try to read each and every comment below, so let me know your thoughts. However, just before I go, if you're into this kind of content and you want to see it uncensored, uncut, and ad-free, check out my Patreon linked in the description below. And while you're down there, you may as well smash that sub button and click that notification bell to be alerted when I release content such as this. But other than that, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.